Here we are with Anahata, and we're trying to talk about this story about this journey of collecting art that my wife Missy and I have been on for over 40 years now. And my name is Wesley Cochran. I was born here in Grange in 1952, June the 8th, 1952. My mother's name is Lyra Cochran, and my dad's name was Gilbert Cochran. And my mother, who I think her main goal in life was to be a housewife and a mother. And she did a very good job, and she was born in 1919 and is now about 99 and a half and still lives at home. And anyway, she's a wonderful lady. And so I have an older brother and an older sister, and so we were all raised here and went to school here in LaGrange. And so my mother's oldest brother was named William L. May, my uncle, Sir William, who was a big influence on us in helping us get started collecting. So Missy and I are always in gratitude and indebted to my uncle for guiding us and helping us put our collection together in those very early years when there was a lot of doubt and uncertainty. Sir William was born here in LaGrange also in 1913. But he fled LaGrange as quick as he could and went out into the world and actually became quite an art patron and art collector for 25 or 30 years during his prime years. And so as the story goes, I got out of college in 1974. And my uncle, I write my uncle a little letter, a little 2-page letter, saying I was sort of a rebel without a cause at that moment, and didn't have a clue what I was going to do, but I liked the idea of travel. And he responded, at that time he had retired from education and was living in Evergreen, Colorado in 1974, and he responded to my letter with a 14-page single-spaced type letter describing the scene in the Rocky Mountains where he was living and invited me to come to Colorado. So I did, and in late 1975, I think it was, I drove out to Colorado and lived with him and my Aunt Carol for about 7 or 8 months. And it was during that time that we sat high up, 9,000 feet up on the edge of a cliff, looking over the city of Denver, and with no TV, a great fireplace, and we built fires for that winter, and I got to listen to all of his sea stories about how wonderful a life he and his wife had collecting art. And so I got the bug, and his advice to me at that time was to break all my pens and pencils and go out into the world and learn a trade and invest your money in art. So I actually was listening to him, and within about 6 months of leaving Colorado in the very early part of 1976, I signed a contract in Houston, Texas, and for a 2-year contract to work on an offshore drilling rig in the Persian Gulf. And so my first assignment was Bahrain in Arabia. So that's where I spent the next 2 years working on an offshore drilling rig. And my uncle was sending me letters to Arabia saying, send me the money. So my uncle had been in the Navy during World War II, so he knew what a young single guy could do with a pocket full of money in a port town. So he was always encouraging me to send money, and he would buy art for me. By that time, my uncle had become an art broker and was helping individuals and corporations put art collections together. So that's what was happening in 1976. So by the time I finished my 2 years in Arabia in 1978, I come back to the States, and my uncle was living in Phoenix, Arizona at that time, and he had bought about 15 or 20 pieces of art from me during that time. So that was the beginning in 1976 of sending him money. Now, this is Missy and I's 42nd year of collecting art, and it has now grown to some, I think, 700 or 800 pieces. So when I got back to the States, my uncle and I kept a very, very strong relationship, and so for the next 12 years, my uncle dies in 1987. We were very close, and we kept sending money and buying art. And lucky for me, he also trained me how to build a library. So to read. He was self-taught, as just like I was. So we were getting the books and trying to keep up to speed with what we were doing. That's the way it all got started. So by 1987, we probably had 75 or 85 pieces of art at that time, and really thought we had the complete package at that time, probably. We actually did not, and we knew the collection looked a little funny because we only had 2 women artists in the collection. We had a Louise Nevelson and we had a Helen Frankenthaler. And we had 2 black artists. We had a Jacob Lawrence and we had a Romare Bearden. And then we had 75 white guys. And that's what you would have in your collection at that time if you were shopping in the mainstream gallery system. There was no women artists really represented during those time frame in the early 80s and late 70s, and no African American artists to speak of. So we realized we were did not have the greatest looking collection at that time. And my uncle and I had talked about it before he dies in 1987, that we should think about African American. But he didn't really have those connections in that world. And so he dies, and then it was really going to be a challenge for Missy and me to stand on our own 2 feet, because my uncle had been such a dominating force in our life with collecting. So we decided that we needed to expand the collection and see how we could find out where this African American art was and how to get to it. And so when we did meet Camille Billups, that was the beginning of our collecting African American art. So in the next movie, we will try to explain how we expanded the collection and got into African American, collecting African American art.